I don't know about you guys, but I have a wood storage problem. It's everywhere. Literally everywhere in my shop. So, maybe the solution is a pile of lumber. Alright, so now after all of that, you can see the shape that I was constructing out of all those 2x4s. It's kind of hard to explain as it was going on, but the point of that is going to be to store all of the lumber in those open slots. And so I made 4 of those, and now it's time to make some stretcher pieces. So I am putting all of them out. You can see the shape that's going on there. In the tall back section is where I can put sheet goods, and then in that shorter front section I can slide offcuts, and then the very top of the shorter section I can use as a workbench top. So that's the goal of this project. It's just kind of hard to explain as it gets going. It's kind of something you got to see to understand. Okay, so here you can see a better idea of where we're going with this. So I've got all those shapes that I have attached with some stretcher pieces. Once we get these bottom ones in, which I did have to put the center ones in so we weren't having 3-inch screws going into each other head on, because obviously that's not going to work. So I am finishing that, and then we're going to have to put some stretchers in the top to give this as much support as possible. So now I need to get casters on this beast because I want to be mobile. It's the purpose of everything I'm making right now is to make my shop easier and better, and one of those things is to be able to move stuff around when I need to. So now I gotta put casters on here. So I tip that thing sideways. I mark the caster just using a Sharpie. I pre-drill because as you can see it's towards the edge, and if I did not pre-drill it would probably just ruin everything I just did. So pre-drilled that, and then I just did 1.5" pocket hole screws. The washer head of the pocket hole screw was just strong enough and wide enough to work with these casters. I haven't had any issues with them. If I do in the future, I will end up doing through bolts, just like I said with the shop stool. Alright, so as you can imagine, that many casters was not cheap, but just look at how easy this thing moves around. Now obviously this is empty without any wood on it, but if it moves this easy now, I feel like it would continue to do well with stuff on it. So here I'm cutting some hardboard. I'm going to use hardboard for the shelves and the top, just because it's easier to slide things on it. There's less friction with it because of the surface that it has. So that's why I went with hardboard. I didn't have any dust collection set up apparently because I made a giant mess. Oh, vacuum it now, that makes sense. Should have done that in the first place. So here I am sliding this thing in there. I was going to slide it in the other way, and then I decided nope, too much friction that way. I did it too tight of a fit. So I just ended up putting it in there sideways and then grabbing a mallet and pounding it down. Didn't use any fasteners. It's going to stay in there well enough. So now sheet goods can slide through there and they're not going to snag at anything. That's the point of that sheet there. And I can tell you that I've used this thing for a couple of years. It is been done very well for me. And so now I'm using the exact same hardboard, but this time that is going to be the workbench top. So there you can see I put sanders up on top of it to show you, but then off camera I notched so I could put the oscillating sander and spindle sander lower, because it was way too high to work on at the height that it was at, so now it's down there. The belt sander, disc sander combo, that one's fine, so it's going to stay where it's at. So here I am making some little brackets that you're going to see me put on the back of the lumber rack here pretty soon. And the purpose of these is to kind of make a little shelf for foam board insulation, which I use to cut sheet goods on when I'm using my track saw. And so that's kind of an annoying thing to have to store all the time. So putting it on the back of this where it's out of the way should help. So here you can see I'm using that shop stool that I built in the last video, and it makes it so much easier. I hate working on the floor, so anytime I can sit on something and do a job that would normally have me on my knees on a hard floor, I will take that. So here I'm just using a clamp to hold it on, and I am using pocket screws. This is not needing to be insanely strong. It is holding foam board, which, as you can imagine, being foam material, it is very light. So that way I'm doing that. And now I need to make kind of a hook is what this is going to be, so that way it doesn't just slide off. It can't just be a shelf. Otherwise, every time I move everything, it's going to just slide off. So this is the hook kind of feature here. But same strategy. Clamp it on just to hold it in place so I can screw it in. And now you can see what I was talking about, this foam board. But I have to angle it that way, so now I'm going to take a hinge. Had some random hinges left over from when I was adding some doors in my house, and with that extra hinge I just stuck it in there, attached a scrap piece of 2x4, and now it's got a little thing to hold it on there. So here you can see it, got everything on there, just loading up all my plywood. I didn't want to use that extra sheet of hardboard, ended up returning that to the store rather than stripping it down just for shelves. Seemed like a waste. So I just used some scrap sheets of plywood that I didn't need, and they're my temporary shelves right now. I'm sure I'll have some scraps in the future that I can use to put on there. So just loading up all the scraps. I definitely save too many plywood scraps. I end up going through this thing probably once every month or two and just burn the scraps that I don't need, just because eventually you just have too many. You're not going to use them all. So here I'm just sliding on. I have some extra oak dowels that I was using for a project and putting all my hardwood on that side. So some hardwood and some pine, just a select pine. Other than plywood material is what's going to go on this side. And so there you have it. That is my new mobile lumber cart, which now is a central area for all of my scraps. Thanks for watching.